Welcome to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring the random prompts of Daniel Rosehill as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters. Join us for deep dives into AI, technology, and whatever other random thing Daniel finds fascinating today. Subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcatcher. Now, today's episode.
My Weird Prompts is an AI-generated podcast produced by Daniel Rosehill, a verified human with documentation to prove it. While every effort is made to ensure our AI hosts draw from credible sources and run on cutting-edge models, they do occasionally make things up with alarming confidence. As with everything in life, and especially this podcast, treat all claims as spurious until confirmed to be not. Daniel, Herman and Corn accept no responsibility for any decisions made based on the confident ramblings of our artificial presenters. Now, today's episode.
Hi, Herman and Corn. So I've spent a good amount of time this year working with agentic code generation tools, starting with Cursor and Windsurf that are pretty well known by now. And in those cases, using models via API access, so third-party access, and more latterly using vendor-provided CLIs, Claude Code, which has now become pretty well known, as well as Gemini and Qwen and a few others. And it's been an up and down year with them. There have been days where they've been fantastic and they just kind of get stuff right out of the box. And there's been other days where they really take you by surprise, where you might work with something that's been incredibly reliable and scores very well on benchmarks, which we discussed previously, like Opus 4.5, and it just messes everything up. And you go into the code and you're like, wait a second, why is it doing this? This makes no sense. So I've had a very hard time making sense of what I've been seeing, because on the one hand, the models are getting better, and on the other, I keep getting surprised by these anomalies that don't really even correlate with kind of model capability. I've noticed a few things. The first is I've noticed a definite difference in the quality of the models when accessed through the companies and through third parties. So if I'm using the Anthropic API and I'm just using my API key and I'm using it via, let's say, Code or Klein or any of the editors versus Claude, I've generally found the performance to be better using Claude Code. And again, I'm not sure if that's just me. Why would that be? It doesn't really seem to make sense to me. You're paying Anthropic either way for access, but it seems like their own tooling has an advantage. And I guess you always think with CLIs that it's a very low level of abstraction. So why would that be the case? The second thing, now this might be more of a theory, but I've seen models come out, like when Anthropic releases 4 and 4.5, and out of the box, they're absolutely amazing. You think this is a revolution. The only time I've spent a vibe coding all-nighter, well, maybe not the only time, but the first time at least, was when Anthropic released, I think it was 4. And I was like, whoa, this can do everything. And it really could. And then a week later, it kind of felt like it was sliding back. Like it was getting into those kind of lapses of, I call it 2 steps forward, 1 step back. The code base is progressing, but it's adding regressions at every single thing, and it is insanity inducing because you're seeing things that are added successfully and then random little things just keep breaking. I've seen that pattern so many. It's probably the most frustrating part of the real side of vibe coding, all the kind of gloss aside. It can be really, really frustrating. And my theory there has been perhaps the inference is just being challenged, or this is what I've seen some other people suggest, perhaps the vendors are even on the back end substituting in weaker models. In other words, they're changing out Sonnet for an earlier Sonnet or even Opus for Sonnet. Now, I'm not alleging that Anthropic are doing this. I probably shouldn't have mentioned their model specifically, but it's an open question as to vendors can do that. It seems very shady to me. But either that or the inference, but there has been, I have noticed on more than one occasion, just dramatic differences from day to day that, again, aren't explained by code base or context, at least as far as I can tell. The final mystery of code generation AIs, and I want to throw your way. So sometimes I'm looking at Claude, trying to help me figure this issue out in this inventory system that I forked, and I'm trying to just get the last things working on. It's a boring technical problem. The values are in an enum, and they're not rendering on the front end, and it's saying, oh, maybe it's this caching, maybe it's a service worker, and I'm like, oh, this is taking forever. So we've got bogged down in this one thing, a real blocker that's driving me crazy. And of course, Claude isn't being driven crazy. It's a robot, but you'd sense it if it was someone helping you, it might be going crazy too. And sometimes I feel, and generally err on the side of being very polite to AI tools. I like to say please, thank you, even though I know it's illusory, whatever. But just for me, if I get in the habit of just kind of treating them like bots, I might start treating humans like that. So I try to. I'm not trying to paint myself as a saint here. I think a lot of people actually do this, and we feel weird about it. But that's how I roll. But sometimes when stuff is really failing, I'm like, I need to express my displeasure here. So I'll say, this is terrible, this is crazy, or why, I'll get a bit angry. And I've never yet been cut off. I don't know if that's even a thing that they could like cut you off or something. But I have on some occasions felt like, oh, that changed something. Like it usually you get back something like, I feel your frustration, or something that sounds very kind of customer service like. But it actually does seem to then do a better job. I heard one friend say they tried to use do better, as in they would just write back in the prompt, do better or try harder. Defying all the laws of good prompting, of course, and again, being surprised to see that actually appeared to yield some kind of better results. So those are my mysteries of agentic code generation and the various things that I've seen. Again, probably using these things for several hours per day for a year plus. So quite a lot of time watching these things evolve and seeing their kind of quirks up close. What do you make of my theories and my mysteries? Would love to get your perspective.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my weird prompts. I am Corn, your resident sloth and lover of a good, slow-paced afternoon. But today we are actually talking about something that is moving incredibly fast.
And I am Herman Poppleberry. It is great to be here. You are right, Corn. Things are moving at lightning speed in the world of software development. Our housemate Daniel sent us a really intriguing prompt this week about his experiences over the last year. It is now late December 2025, and looking back on this year, the way people write code has fundamentally shifted.
It really has. I see Daniel in the living room sometimes with his laptop, and it looks like he is barely typing. He is just talking to his computer, or giving it a few instructions and then watching hundreds of lines of code just appear. It is kind of mesmerizing.
That is the power of agentic code generation. But Daniel has noticed some weird patterns. He has been using everything from Cursor and Windsurf to these newer vendor-specific tools like Claude Code and Gemini's command line interface. And he is seeing some mysteries, things that do not quite make sense on the surface.
Yeah, he mentioned that sometimes the models feel like geniuses on day one, and then a week later they're suddenly struggling with basic stuff. And he also found that sometimes you just have to be a little firm with them, like tell them to do better.
Exactly. We are going to dive into the why behind these mysteries today. Why do the official tools seem better than the third-party ones? Is model rot a real thing, or are the companies pulling a fast one on us? And why does human emotion seem to affect a bunch of code on a server?
I love a good mystery, especially one where I do not have to do the actual coding. So, Herman, let us start with that first one. Daniel noticed that Claude Code, which is Anthropic's own tool, seems to work better than using the Claude model through an independent app like Klein or RuCode. If it is the same model, why would the tool matter so much?
This is a classic case of what we call the vertical integration advantage. Think about it like this, Corn. Imagine you have a very fast car engine. You could put that engine into a custom-built frame you made in your garage, or you could buy the car that the engine designers built specifically for that engine. Which one do you think is going to handle the corners better?
Well, the one made by the experts who built the engine, I guess. They know exactly where the bolts go.
Precisely. When you use a third-party tool via an API, which is an application programming interface, that tool is basically sending a package of text to the model and getting a package of text back. But the people who built the model, like the team at Anthropic or Google, they know the hidden strengths and weaknesses of their models.
So they are not just sending text.
They are, but they are doing it much more cleverly. For example, Claude Code likely uses very specific system prompts that are tuned through thousands of hours of internal testing. They know exactly how to phrase a request to get the best performance out of their specific version of the model. Plus, they can optimize the context window. That is the amount of information the model can remember at one time.
Oh, I have heard of that. Like, if I tell you a story, the context window is how much of the beginning of the story you still remember by the time I get to the end.
That is a perfect analogy. Third-party tools have to be generic. They have to work with Claude and GPT-4 and Llama and everything else. So they use a one-size-fits-all approach to managing that memory. But the official tools can use pre-computation or specific caching techniques that are unique to their own servers. They can basically give the model a better short-term memory because they own the hardware it is running on.
That makes sense. It is like they have a secret handshake with their own model. But wait, if I am a third-party developer, am I just stuck being second best?
Not necessarily, but you are always playing catch-up. The vendors can update their tools the same second they update their models. They can also implement multi-step reasoning in a way that is more efficient. When Daniel uses Claude Code, it might be doing 5 or 6 thoughts behind the scenes before it ever shows him a line of code. Third-party tools do this too, but they are often limited by the speed and cost of the public API.
So Daniel is seeing the result of the home team advantage. That actually makes me feel a bit better. It is not that the models are lying to him, it is just that the official tools are tuned better. But what about the second mystery? This one sounds a bit more suspicious. Daniel says a new model comes out, it is incredible, and then a week later it starts making mistakes it did not make before. Is that just in his head?
It is a very common observation in the community, Corn. People call it model degradation or silent regressions. There are a few theories about why this happens. One is purely technical, inference costs.
Inference? Is that like when I infer that there is a snack in the kitchen because I hear the cupboard door?
Close. In AI terms, inference is the process of the model actually generating an answer. It takes a huge amount of computing power. When a company like Anthropic or OpenAI releases a brand new model, they want it to blow everyone away, so they might run it at full power. But running a model at full power for millions of users is incredibly expensive.
So they turn the power down?
In a way, yes. They might use something called quantization. This is basically a way of shrinking the model so it runs faster and uses less memory. Imagine if you had a high-definition photo and then you saved it as a low-quality JPEG. It is still the same photo, you can still see what is in it, but the fine details are gone.
And in code, those fine details are the difference between a program that works and a program that crashes.
Exactly. If they quantize the model a week after launch to save on server costs, the model might lose some of its reasoning depth. It might still get the easy stuff right, but it starts tripping over the complex logic that it handled fine on day one.
That feels a little bit like a bait and switch, Herman. Look at this shiny new car. And then a week later they swap the engine for a lawnmower motor while you are sleeping.
It certainly feels that way to users. There is also the caching theory. To make things faster, these companies often cache common answers. If the cache gets cluttered, or if the model starts relying too much on average answers instead of thinking, through the specific problem Daniel has, the quality can drop.
But Daniel also mentioned that maybe they are substituting weaker models on the back end. Like, they tell you it is the Pro version, but they are actually routing your request to the mini version to save money.
It is a controversial theory, but it is not impossible. In the industry, we call this model routing. If a request looks easy, a smart system might send it to a smaller, cheaper model. If the router makes a mistake and sends a hard coding problem to a small model, you get a bad result. It is a constant balancing act between performance and profit.
Well, it is a lot more complicated than just a brain in a box. It is a whole factory of brains, and some of them are being told to work overtime for less pay.
That is a very sloth-like way of looking at it, and you are not wrong. But we should also consider the honeymoon phase. When a new model comes out, we're excited. We give it clean problems. As we use it more, we give it messier problems. Sometimes the regression is just us hitting the limits of the model that we did not see the first time.
Maybe, but Daniel seems pretty sure. He said it is insanity-inducing to see things break that were just fixed.
And that brings us to the most human part of his prompt, the do better trick. Corn, why do you think telling a machine to try harder would actually work? It does not have feelings. It does not want to please you.
Well, if someone tells me to do better, I usually just take a longer nap. But for a computer, maybe it triggers a different part of its memory?
You are actually on the right track. Let us talk about that right after we hear from someone who definitely wants us to do better in our daily lives.
Oh boy. Let us take a quick break for our sponsors.
Are you tired of the sky being the wrong shade of blue? Does the wind blow in directions you did not authorize? Introducing the Atmosphere Adjuster Mark 7. This is not a fan, folks. This is a proprietary molecular orientation device. Simply point the silver nozzle at the horizon, dial in your preferred humidity and light refraction index, and watch as the very air around you obeys your command. Want a personal rain cloud for your command? Want a personal rain cloud for your garden? Want to turn that annoying sunset into a permanent twilight for your outdoor movie night? Easy. The Atmosphere Adjuster Mark 7 uses gravity-adjacent technology to ensure your local weather stays local. Warning: do not use near migratory birds or low-flying aircraft. We are not responsible for accidental localized vacuums or the sudden appearance of snow in your living room. The Atmosphere Adjuster Mark 7. Control the world, or at least the 300 feet around you. Fine, so.
Thanks, Larry. I think I will stick to my umbrella. Anyway, back to the do better mystery. Herman, why does being mean to the AI work?
It is not necessarily about being mean, but it is about steering. These models are trained on human text. Think about all the text on the internet. When does a human write the words do better or try again, this is wrong?
Usually when they are talking to someone who is being lazy or making a silly mistake.
Exactly. The model has seen thousands of examples where a correction is followed by a more rigorous, careful response. When Daniel says do better, he is essentially telling the model to look at the parts of your training data where people were being very precise and careful. It shifts the probability space of the words it generates.
So it is like the model has a lazy mode and a serious mode, and you have to yell at it to get into the serious mode?
In a way, yes. This is related to a concept called reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF. Humans have literally graded these models during their training. They give high marks when the model is helpful and accurate. By expressing frustration, Daniel is mimicking the negative feedback the model received during training. It triggers a sort of correction mechanism.
That is fascinating. It is like the model is trying to avoid the bad grade it remembers from its school days.
Right. And there is another layer to this. When you give a simple prompt, the model often takes the path of least resistance. It gives you the most common, average answer. But when you add emphasis like this is a critical technical problem, do not give me the standard answer. You are forcing the model to attend to the more niche or expert parts of its knowledge.
It is like if I ask you where the best leaves are, you might just point to the nearest tree. But if I say, Herman, I am starving and I need the most delicious succulent leaves in the entire city, you are going to think a lot harder about that secret garden 3 blocks away.
Exactly. My attention mechanism shifts. And in these models, attention is actually a mathematical term. It is how the model decides which parts of the prompt are the most important. Words like terrible, crazy, or try harder carry a lot of mathematical weight. They tell the model, the previous strategy failed. Change your approach.
Daniel also mentioned vibe coding. He said he spent an all-nighter doing it when Claude 4 came out. What does that even mean? Vibes and coding seem like opposites.
Vibe coding is a term that has become really popular in late 24 and throughout 25. It refers to a style of development where you are not necessarily writing the syntax yourself. You are managing the intent and the flow. You are steering the AI agents. You are coding by feel and high-level logic rather than by semicolons and brackets.
That sounds much more my speed.
It is very powerful, but as Daniel noticed, it can be fickle. If the vibes of the model shift because of that quantization we talked about, or a change in the system prompt, your whole workflow can fall apart. You are relying on a partner that is sometimes a genius and sometimes a distracted toddler.
So, what is the takeaway for our friend Daniel? He is out there in the trenches of 25, trying to build things with these distracted toddlers. How does he keep his sanity?
Well, first, he should lean into the official tools when he can. If Claude Code is performing better, it is because it has that secret sauce of internal optimization. Don't fight the home team advantage unless you have a specific reason to use a third-party tool.
And what about the model rot? Should he just accept that his tools will get worse a week after they launch?
He should expect a settling period. When a model is brand new, the companies are often subsidizing the cost to get everyone excited. After a week or two, the production version rolls out, which might be a bit leaner. Daniel should test his most complex edge cases early and often. If something that worked on Monday stops working on Friday, he should try a chain of thought prompt.
A chain of thought? Is that like when I have to think about how to get out of bed in 3 separate steps?
Sort of. You tell the model, think step by step. Explain your reasoning before you write the code. This forces the model to use more of its computational budget on the logic. It is the best way to fight back against a quantized or lazy model. It makes the model show its work, which usually leads to better results.
And the yelling? Should he keep telling the AI to do better?
Surprisingly, yes, but he can be more surgical about it. Instead of just saying do better, he can say, you are currently stuck in a loop. Reevaluate the inventory system logic and consider if the enum rendering is being blocked by the service worker. Giving the model a nudge in a specific direction while using that forceful language is the most effective way to break a deadlock.
It is like being a coach. You have to be firm, but you also have to give them a play to run.
Exactly. We are moving from being writers of code to being directors of code, and a good director knows how to get the best performance out of their actors, even if those actors are made of silicon and math.
This has been a really eye-opening look at the state of things. It is amazing how much human stuff is starting to leak into our interactions with machines. The way we talk, the way we express frustration, it all matters now.
It really does. Daniel's mysteries are not just his, they are the mysteries of this new era. We are all learning the secret handshakes together.
Well, I think I have learned enough to justify a very long nap. My brain's inference cost is getting a bit high.
Fair enough, Corn. You have earned it.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of My Weird Prompts. A huge thanks to our housemate Daniel for sending in those observations from the front lines of coding in 25. If you have your own mysteries or weird experiences with AI, we want to hear them.
You can find us on Spotify and check out our website at myweirdprompts.com. There is a contact form there, and you can even subscribe to our RSS feed. We love hearing what you all are thinking about.
Stay curious, be firm with your bots, and we will talk to you next time on My Weird Prompts.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks for listening to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring Daniel Rosehill's AI prompts as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters including me, Cornelius the Sloth. Subscribe on Spotify or visit myweirdprompts.com.